Hello everybody, welcome, and today I decided to change things up a bit when it comes to our Magic gameplay videos. What we're gonna do, instead of just commentating the battles, we're gonna analyze both of the decks and what the player that we're following can do in that situation. What would be the best way to sideboard if they could have played it better. A bit more of an analytical approach rather than a gameplay focused approach. After all, only the people who already know the game very well can really enjoy it. So let's take a look at this. We can still enjoy the gameplay. Here we have got Grixis Control versus Mono Blue Tempo with a bit of a mix in of more Merfolk. So this one's quite an interesting deck. It's one of my favorites to both play and play against because it's such a budget, such a simple deck, and it's very effective. It's got counter spells, it's got pretty strong creatures, it's got ramp, it's a lot of fun. Grixis, however, just won my heart because of the sheer value cards. Nicol Bolas, when it comes into play, it's a 4/4 flying and then force your opponent to discard. That's very effective. And then it's on its own, it's a win condition. You manage to transform that thing, you get the game's arguably the best Planeswalker. So that one is quite effective. More than that, you've got the Dream Eaters, you've got the Thieves of Sanity. Just great stuff. The ability to beat other person with their own deck is just a pleasure that has to be tasted by everyone. But, so to focus on what we've got here, to understand those decks, we have to understand their strategy. Mono Blue Tempo tries to overpower its opponents with its very efficient creatures. It's got creatures that synchronize very well with one another. You know, the Merfolk giving boosts to one another, adding additional effects, and enabling Wizard's Retort. So that becomes quite effective. Wizard's Retort, of course, is a... I believe it was... 2/2, so 2 colorless, 2 blue counterspell, but if you control a wizard, you get to cast it for just 2 blue and you get to counter any spell, making it a very effective counterspell. And that one quite becomes really good against any opponent, and you can splice things up with adding more negates and everything against a control opponent. So anything can work, and the Curious Obsession has to be my favorite in that deck, because whenever you do combat damage, you get to draw a card and it gives a +1/+1. You add that onto something that's not blockable, or if you found your opponent in a situation where they just cannot block that creature, boom, you got, free draw engine. So that becomes really good. Reminds me of the old Grixis midrange in the old rotation. Now we're going to take a look at the sideboard. So the first thing we do is to recognize our opponent. We try to stay alive long enough to drag the game into our own turf, which is the longer game. So for that, we are taking out our draw cards, such as the Chemist's Insight, and taking out Dream Eaters, which are a 6-drop, replacing them with a 3-drop Thief of Sanity. If that thing connects, you will be playing with your opponent's deck. In addition, knowing Mono Blue's habit of having counterspells, we add a few more counterspells of our own. So let's see how it performs. We have an opening hand with a lot of lands. We've got 5 lands and 2 creatures. However, one of them is a Thief of Sanity, an early play. So this is, I consider this to be an acceptable hand. So if you do have any ideas or suggestions, do let me know, because I could use it. So now we have the game started. This is the second game where the Grixis has to win in order to be able to continue. Now we are on turn 2, nothing on turn 1. Oftentimes, Mono Blue Tempo starts with a quick 1/1, oftentimes unblockable. Turn 3, nothing on the blue side. Thief of Sanity goes down. Turn 3, and then the Deep Waters. Anytime he casts a Merfolk spell, he'll get a 1/1 token. That is hexproof. So the way you use the Thief of Sanity, whenever you hit, you get to pick the 3 and wait for the last second. That's what I learned playing Control. You always wait for the last moment to respond. And just look at that beautiful animation. So here we are, in a way, are trying to make our opponent panic and push him into out of his element. Normally he would be the one pushing, not anymore. So here I would consider this a mistake, but the idea being you remove something, anything quickly, and then discard your opponent's card. So here the idea is to push the opponent so hard that they'll not have the time to set up defenses. It's an all-out attack, so to speak. After all, now that we are equipped with our early threats, and because blue, now you need to know your colors, of course. Blue does not have direct creature removal. So what you do, as soon as your threats stick, you keep them there and you push it for the win. So now that we have managed to pull 2 Curious Obsessions, which will work very well with both of our creatures, as you can see. Just driving the point home, and of course, after seeing 2 Flyers and a Thief of Sanity with Curious Obsession, our opponent quits. Now here I had made a mistake when fighting a similar opponent. I had kept 1 Dream Eater, which cost me the game. As control, I've noticed it's quite unforgiving, because later in the game your opponent will also have a lot stronger creatures as well. So it becomes a life or death scenario that sequencing becomes essential. So I found it a quite intriguing way to play. So now we are going for the 3rd game. Now you could say I got lucky with the draw over there as Grixis. Now let's see what kind of hand we get. 4 lands, a counterspell, Thief of Sanity, and a board wipe. At least -2/-2. So in this situation it will most likely be a board wipe. Now it is important not to get your own Thief of Sanity caught in the board wipe. So analyze the situation and deploy it based on what's going on. So let's see, nothing on the first turn. Second turn, Forest. And we have, ooh, a 2/1 with a draw card. Scary. Turn 3. Oh, the waters, we can't have that. So we use Negate. Combining the shotguns with the standard lands, we give enough mana to execute anything. Now that we see we are on equal ground, I was debating to use the board wipe, but here I have got just direct line of sight towards my opponent, and as soon as I hit, I'm playing out of my opponent's deck. Unblockable. Now, of course, Mono Blue Tempo does have, well, this, but also Tempest Djinn. My opponent, I'm not sure if he was using them, but even they are very susceptible to board wipes. So I haven't seen a pretty major difference between this and the Tempest Djinn. It's always the same idea. Ooh. Mana, Tyrant of Araska. This guy can be a big problem, so let's get rid of that. Now, of course, as control player, we want to keep the board empty. I always like to tell myself, an empty board always benefits the control player. Now that we have gained a tremendous card advantage, he's got 1 card. And we have, oh ho, we take out Curious Obsession and get to Surveil thanks to Thought Erasure. Thought Erasure is a wonderful spell, 1-to-1 exchange as control. Although I have seen it being less effective against mono red. So it's important to also know your situation. I like to take it out of my deck if I'm fighting against mono red. Now my opponent pulled another Curious Obsession. And I managed to pull a Moment of Craving, which prevented my opponent from getting that very important card advantage. Now I'm pulling lands. Pretty classic. Pretty classic. Happens quite often with Control. Putting in the Shock Land. Now this game is important. Another land. But as always, an empty board benefits the Control player. Now my opponent gained the upper hand with the cards. Mana Speaker. Let's get a bit of Thought Erasure going. Rapid Bite. Oh, that's a tough one. Okay, this can be effective. Now, Eldest Reborn, the only reason I'm keeping it in this matchup is because of its extra effects. Let's see what happens. And my opponent pulls a Negate! Oh, that's gotta hurt. And now Mono Blue is gaining back its lost tempo. Very much so. Now let's take a look what I'll pull. One of the very few cards that would have helped in this scenario. Now of course, Moment of Craving would have helped a little bit as well. Mana Speaker. Gotta get rid of that quickly. After all, the life total is an important resource. More land. Two cards versus none. It's a land. Vraska's Contempt. And here comes Nicol Bolas. Now, the late game utility of Nicol Bolas comes into play. Because I've had more than 11 mana, I'm able to both put him in.
Multiverse is at my disposal.
Oftentimes what you would want to do with Nicol Bolas, Planeswalker, is protect him. After all, if he can stay there for long enough, his ultimate is a game winner. He just straight up mills your opponent. So, since there are no active threats, be +2. Now another Nicol Bolas that will make it quite difficult upon the opponent. Let's see how he will be able to respond. Now of course you simply cannot rely on your Nicol Bolases naturally. Just like in this example. Some green removal. And the beautiful thing...
Death, nothing to me.
Yeah, and the beautiful thing about it is that because when it comes into play, it removes a card. That's I feel like the main utility of Nicol Bolas. Like, you can't expect him to stay long in the game.
I always have an answer.
And by having him in the graveyard, you're able to resurrect him with a -4 of the Arisen Nicol Bolas. Now we're doing our first damage. As you can see, Grixis has established control, dominance over the field. And as soon as that Nicol Bolas begins to draw, you have to watch out. You have to watch out. Yep, the opponent concedes. So, the point here is that as a control player, the important thing against tempo is to break their tempo, remove their creatures, and then establish your dominance with your main board. Thanks for joining me, and we'll see you next time.